Leaders are readers of their resources. A major difference between leaders and everyone else is the way they see resources. A good worker encounters a challenge and thinks, "What can I do to help?" A high achiever asks, "How can I solve this problem?" A peak performer wonders, "What must I do to reach the next level so that I can overcome this?" Leaders think differently. They think in terms of resources and how to how to maximize them. They see a challenge, problem, or opportunity, and they think, who's the best person to take this on? What resources, raw materials, technology, information, and so forth do we possess that will help us? What will this take financially? How can I encourage my team to achieve success? Leaders see everything with a leadership bias. Their focus is on mobilizing people and leveraging resources to achieve their goals rather than on using their own individual efforts. Leaders who want to succeed maximize every asset and resource they have for the benefit of the organization. For that reason, they are continually aware of what they have at their disposal. Little box. Leaders who want to succeed maximize every asset and resource they have for the benefit of their organization. Leaders are readers of people. President Lyndon Johnson once said that when you walk into a room, you don't belong in politics if you can't tell who's for you and who's against you. The statement also applies to any other kind of leader. Intuition helps. Leaders sense what's happening among people and know their hopes, fears, and concerns. They can sense what's happening in a room, whether they're curiosity, doubt, reluctance, anticipation, or relief. Reading people is perhaps the most important intuitive skill leaders can possess. After all, if what you're doing doesn't involve people, it's not leadership. And if you aren't persuading people to follow, you aren't really leading. Leaders are readers of themselves. Finally, good leaders develop the ability to read themselves. Poet James Russell Lowell observed, "No one can produce great things who is not thoroughly sincere in dealing with himself." Leaders must know not only their own strengths and blind spots, skills and weaknesses, but also their current state of mind. Why? Because leaders can hinder progress just as easily as they can help create it. In fact, it's easier to damage an organization than it is to build one. We've all seen excellent organizations that took generations to build begin falling apart in a matter of years. When leaders become self-centered, pessimistic, or rigid in their thinking, they often hurt their organization because they're likely to fall into a trap of thinking they cannot or should not change. And once that happens, the organization has a hard time becoming better. Its decline is inevitable. 3 levels of leadership intuition. If you're saying to yourself, "I'd like to be able to read these dynamics in my organization, but I just don't see things intuitively," don't despair. The good news is that you can improve your leadership intuition, even if you're not a natural-born leader. As I've already mentioned, leadership intuition is informed intuition. The less natural leadership talent you have, the more you will need to make up for it by developing skills and gaining experience. They can help you develop thinking patterns, and thinking patterns can be learned. I've found that all people fit into 3 major intuition levels. Number 1, those who naturally understand leadership. Some people are born with exceptional leadership gifts. They instinctively understand people and know how to move them from point A. Even when they're kids, they act as leaders. Watch them on the playground, and you can see other kids following them. People with natural leadership intuition can build upon it and become world-class leaders of the highest caliber. Number 2, those who can be nurtured to understand leadership. Most people fall into this category. They have adequate people skills, and if they are teachable, they can develop intuition. Leadership can be learned. However, people who don't try to improve their leadership and never work to develop their intuition are condemned to being blindsided in their leadership for the rest of their lives. Number 3, those who will never understand leadership. I believe nearly everyone is capable of developing leadership skills and intuition, but occasionally I run across someone who doesn't seem to have a leadership bone in his body and who has no interest in developing the skills necessary to lead. This isn't you because these people never pick up a leadership book. Developing intuition by changing your thinking. Several years ago, I gained insight into college football and about how quarterbacks are trained to think when I was invited to the University of Southern California. Their coach at the time was Larry Smith. He asked me to speak to the Trojans football team before a big game and also allowed me to visit the team's offensive war room. On chalkboards, covering every wall, the coaches had mapped out every possible situation their team could be in, according to down, yardage, and place on the field. And for every situation, the coaches had planned a specific play designed to succeed, based on their years of experience and their intuitive knowledge of the game. While I was there, I noticed a cut against one of the walls. When I asked what it was for, the offensive coordinator said, "I always spend Friday night here to make sure that I know all the plays too." "Yeah, but you've got all of them written down on the sheet and that you'll carry them with you on the sidelines," I said. "Why don't you just use that?" "I can't rely on that," he answered. "There isn't time. You see, by the time the ball carrier's knee touches the ground, I have to know what play to call next based on the situation. There's no time to fumble around deciding what to do." It was his job to put the coaching staff's intuition into action in an instant. But the coaches didn't stop there. The 3 USC quarterbacks had to memorize every one of those plays. The night before the game, I watched as the coaches grilled those young men, one situation after another at them. The job of the quarterbacks was to recite which play situation. The coaches wanted those players to be so well informed, so ready, that their intuition would take over during crunch time. It would help them to effectively lead the team. Little box. A leader has to read the situation and know instinctively what play to call. Leaders solve problems using the law of intuition. Whenever leaders face a problem, they automatically measure it and begin solving it. Using the law of intuition, they evaluate everything with a leadership bias. For example, leadership intuition came into play in recent years at Apple Computer. Just about everybody knows the success story of Apple. The company was created in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in a garage. Just 4 years later, the business went public, opening at $22 a share and selling 4.6 shares. It made more than 40 employees and investors millionaires overnight. But Apple's story hasn't been all positive. Since those early years, Apple's success, stock value, and ability to capture customers have fluctuated wildly. Jobs left Apple in 1985. Having been pushed out in a battle with CEO John Sculley, the former Pepsi president whom Jobs had recruited in 1983. Sculley was followed by Michael Spindler in 1993, and then Gilbert Amelio in 1996. None of them was able to reestablish Apple's previous success. In its glory days, Apple had sold 14.6% of all personal computers in the United States. By 1997, sales were down to 3.5%. That was when Apple again looked to the leadership of its original founder, Steve Jobs, for help. The failing company believed he could save it. Whenever leaders face a problem, they automatically measure it and begin solving it using the law of intuition. Reinventing Apple. Jobs intuitively reviewed the situation and immediately took action. He knew that improvement was impossible without a change in leadership, so he quickly dismissed all but 2 of the previous board members and installed new ones. He made changes in the executive leadership, and he fired the company's ad agency and held a competition for the account among 3 firms. He also refocused the company. Jobs wanted to get back to the basics of what Apple had always done best: use its individuality to create products that made a difference. At the time, Jobs said, "We've reviewed the road map of new products and axed more than 70% of the projects, keeping the 30% that were gems. Plus, we're adding new ones that are a whole new paradigm of looking at computers." None of those actions was especially surprising, but Jobs also did something that really showed the law of intuition. He read Apple's situation and made a leadership decision and went absolutely against the grain of Apple's previous thinking. It was an incredible intuitive leadership leap. Jobs created a strategic alliance with the man whom Apple employees consider to be their arch enemy, Bill Gates. Jobs explained, "I called Bill and said Microsoft and Apple should work more closely together, but we have this issue to resolve, this intellectual property dispute." They negotiated a deal quickly, which settled Apple's lawsuit against Microsoft. Gates promised to pay off Apple and invest $150 million in non-voting stock. They cleared the way for future partnership and brought much-needed capital to the company. It was something only an intuitive leader would have done. Apple's stock value immediately went up 33%, and in time, Apple regained some of the prestige it had lost over the years. Revolutionizing music. In 2001, Jobs made another leadership move based on his intuition. While other computer manufacturers were pursuing PDAs, he was looking at music. And when an independent contractor and hardware expert named Tony Fadell approached Apple with an idea for an MP3 player and a music sales company, Apple embraced it, even though several other companies had rejected it. Fadell was hired on, and they began working on what would eventually be known as the iPod. Improvement was impossible without change. Jobs' involvement with the iPod is an indication of his leadership intuition. Ben Knowles, who was on the inside of the project, says, "The interesting thing about the iPod is that since it started, it had 100% of Steve Jobs' time. Not many projects get that. He was heavily involved in every single aspect of the project. Why did Jobs do that? Because his intuition as a leader made him understand the impact that the device could make. It was consistent with his vision for creating a digital lifestyle. Jobs has been right on. Sales have been phenomenal and have exceeded the company's computer sales. Apple was making a profit while other technology companies suffered. By spring of 2002, Apple had shipped more than 10 million units. By the end of 2005, Apple possessed 75% of the world market for digital music players." Jobs' story is a reminder that leadership is really more than science. The principles of leadership are constant, but the application changes with every leader and every situation. That's why it requires intuition. Without it, leaders get blindsided. And that's one of the worst things that can happen to a leader. If you want to lead long, lead well, and stay ahead of others, you've got to obey the law of intuition. Applying the law of intuition to your life. Number 1, how are you when it comes to trusting your intuition? Are you a facts or feelings person? To become better at the law of intuition, you must first be willing to trust your intuition. Begin by working within your areas of greatest strength. First, determine which is your strongest natural talent. Second, participate in that talent, paying attention to your feelings, instincts, and intuition. When do you know something is right? Before you have evidence. When do you know something is right? Before you have evidence. How can you tell when you're on? Do your instincts in this area ever betray you? If so, when and why? Get to know your aptitude for intuition, where you're strong before trying to develop it in leadership. Number 2, one of the most important abilities in leadership is reading people. How would you rate yourself in this area? Can you tell what others are feeling? Can you sense when people are upset, happy, confused, angry? Do you anticipate what others are thinking? If this is not an area of strength for you, then work on improving by doing these things. Read books on relationships. Engage more people in conversation. Become a people watcher. Train yourself to think in terms of mobilizing people and harnessing resources. Think about current projects or goals. Now imagine how you can accomplish them without doing any of the work yourself except for recruiting, empowering, and motivating others. You may even want to write the following on a note card and keep it in your pocket or organizer. Who is the best person to take this on? What resources do we possess that can help us? What will this take financially? How can I encourage my team to achieve success?